Good afternoon. Hi, my name is David Azuelos. I am the Supervisor of Child Welfare at Jewish Child Family Service, and I'm here today presenting on how to report child abuse. Okay, so let's discuss the topics for today. We are going to talk about child welfare statistics in Canada and Manitoba. We're going to talk about the child welfare system and its structure in Manitoba. We will look at what child abuse is and what it isn't, what your duty is to report, what indicators of child abuse actually look like, and maybe we'll do a group exercise if you're up for it, and we'll talk about your responsibility in all of this, and end with some resources that you can use to follow up on. Let's go. So when we look at child welfare statistics in Canada, we can see that about 61,000 children in care currently live in Canada, and that number is about 9,200 of the children in Manitoba are in care. So if you break that down into children per thousand, that's about 8.24 per thousand children in Canada. But you'll notice that number is much higher in Manitoba. So the number in Manitoba is 29 children per every thousand are in the care of the government. That number is pretty alarming. You can see by the statistics on the bottom that 90% of children in care in Manitoba are Indigenous, and 53% in Canada are Indigenous. So the effects of colonialism and the residential school system still impact how kids from Indigenous backgrounds are living today, and unfortunately the struggles that a lot of families have in parenting and how the child welfare system connects with them. So we're trying to do better, and we're trying to make their lives better, and it's still a struggle. So in Manitoba, there are 4 regional authorities that do the child welfare work. The first one is First Nations and Northern Manitoba CFS Authority, and then there's Southern First Nations, Métis CFS, and then there's the General Authority. Jewish Child and Family Service is mandated by the General Authority. They also govern Winnipeg CFS, Western CFS, and Rural and Northern. While Jewish Child and Family Services works with many of the Jewish families in the child welfare system in Winnipeg, they also rely on the support of another agency, and that agency is ANCHOR, or All Nations Coordinated Response. They do the after-hour work for child welfare in Manitoba, specifically for Winnipeg Child and Family Services, and for Jewish Child and Family Services. There's a couple other agencies that also rely on them for their after-hour work. They take new reports, they investigate the reports, they take phone calls when we're closed, and they are known as the centralized intake agency. So we rely on them heavily and appreciate the work they do. One other piece is that if you are calling them at 204-944-4200, you can make a report anonymously. So if you have information and you need to share it, but you're worried that it's going to get back to you, well, you can say that you don't want your name to be connected to the report, and they will respect that. So let's delve into what child abuse actually is. So the working definition from the Child and Family Services Act specifies that child abuse is any act or failure to act resulting in harm or risk of harm to a child. So that includes the different types of abuse. There's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, and more recently they've included the effects of exposure to domestic violence in that as well. Here's an interesting graphic that kind of speaks to the work that's done by the different agencies. So you have an iceberg, and underneath the water, you don't really know how big the iceberg actually is, but that kind of represents all of the abuse that exists in our system that isn't reported. So there's probably a lot of kids that are struggling and nobody makes a report to CFS. And so that's sort of the broader, bigger piece that's not uncovered of the iceberg. Then you have above water, some of the cases that do get reported. And so those are the child welfare investigations, and they work alongside police investigations if it's a criminal matter. The above the icebergs, it sort of shows how some of the reports are false and they get screened out. So if you have an angry neighbor that hates that you park in front of his house all the time, and he decides to make your life hell by reporting a fake child abuse report, well, that'll get screened out as they investigate and learn that it was nonsense. Child welfare in Manitoba is governed by the Child and Family Services Act, and specifically Section 18 of that act speaks to our duty to report. So what does that mean? If a person has information that leads them to reasonably believe that a child is or might be in need of protection, they must immediately report it. So if you fail to do that, you could face a fine of up to $50,000 or 24 months in prison. I don't know of anybody that's ever been charged with that. However, it does speak to the importance and the need for people to make reports to keep our children safe. So this slide is about physical abuse, and these are some signs, both physical and behavioral, that you can look for in campers that are possibly experiencing physical abuse at home or elsewhere. Again, these are signs, and they could be red flags, but it doesn't mean that the existence of any of these things immediately means a child is being abused. There could be other explanations for any of these things, so don't jump the gun, but it's really the accumulation of some of these things with some common sense that could lead you to share this information. So let's look at some of them. Unexplained or repetitive bruises, burns, or fractures. In brackets, it says spiral fracture. A spiral fracture is if somebody were to twist a child's arm like that, a doctor would look at an x-ray and see that the arm was broken and not in a way that would make sense by falling or any other way. It's specific to an abuse, most likely. So that kind of fracture would speak to some sort of poor discipline or parenting practice, and is an immediate red flag. Other ones aren't as clear cut, but if you have injuries that aren't typical of somebody's age, if a child says they fell and they bumped their forehead, then why are there cigarette burns on their arms in addition to the bruises? So it's piecing the puzzle together. Some people that experience physical abuse have been hit and threatened to be hit, so they might flinch when somebody comes close to them. They could be withdrawn, sometimes crying excessively. Really, you're looking for excuses for injuries that just don't make sense. Some kids might say they're afraid of going home. That could be an indicator of abuse. They could be afraid of getting in trouble. Please don't tell my dad. And sometimes that's just normal, like nobody wants to get in trouble, but an excessive version of that might be an indicator of abuse. Sometimes children will hide bruises or injuries with clothes. So if someone's wearing a winter jacket on a hot day, you might question what the reasoning is, and it could be that they're trying to hide a bruise. Emotional abuse. Some physical signs that you might look for that could explain emotional abuse could include speech or language delays, failure to thrive or gain weight. Again, these are possible indicators. Every child that has a stutter or a speech impediment could have a different explanation for it. It could be a genetic piece. A language delay could just be new to the country, English second language. Failure to thrive could also have medical explanations. They might have a medical condition that prevents them from gaining weight when they eat, but it could also be indicative of not being fed often. Behavioral signs to look for regarding emotional abuse could include, um, an overly compliant child, an overly aggressive child, someone that's extremely clingy, someone that's withdrawn, who isolates themselves or is fearful of people. There could be difficulty controlling emotions, big mood swings. They could run away. Again, these are all potential signs. Don't overthink them. You can share them with the director of your camp, and together you can assess whether you think these things are indicative of emotional abuse. And if you have questions, you can always come to JCFS. We're up on the second floor here at the Reedy Center. There are a number of ways a child that's experiencing sexual abuse could present that could lead you to question whether there's abuse happening in the home. And here are a couple examples of them. So physical signs could look like bruising or bleeding in the genital area. There could be complaints about sexual transmitted infections. The kids you're working with aren't going to be of age where you'd expect them to be having sex. So if they're actually complaining of something that might be an STI, you'd probably want to notify somebody. There could be difficulty walking or sitting. Again, that could be anything. That could be somebody stubbing a toe, or it could be, something more nefarious like, physical pain from being abused sexually. Other signs could be that they have knowledge of sex that is well beyond their years. They might fear specific people or places. They might talk about bedwetting. They might physically be sexually acting out. There could be some self-inflicted injuries. They could be talking about promiscuity and hooking up with multiple people. They might even just be afraid to undress in a locker room. But again, that could also just be a child that has body image issues, and that's totally normal too. So those are some of the signs to look out for. Now, you probably won't be dealing with age of consent very much in this line of work at summer camp, but just so you're aware, I thought I'd throw a slide in about consent. So, sexual consent means a voluntary, informed, and ongoing yes, either verbally or through clear actions. It must be mutual, sober, and informed, and can be withdrawn at any time, even mid activity. It is absent if a person is coerced, threatened, intoxicated, unconscious, silent, or lacks capacity. So those are things about consent that you need to be aware of. As far as the age of consent in Canada, 16 is the general age of consent, and I'll speak a little more to that on the next slide because there is a caveat. But there's also exceptions when children are closer in age. So if you're 14 to 15, you can consent to somebody having sex with, if they're up to 5 years older than you, as long as there's no power dynamic between them. Ages 12 to 13 can consent to somebody within 2 years of their age. Someone under 12 can never consent to sex. So a little bit more about the consent of a 16 or 17-year-old having sex. So if the partner is in a position of trust or authority or dependency, like a teacher or a coach or a doctor or a babysitter, that's not consent. That's not legal. So you should know that. So we've talked about physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Those are acts of commission, so they result in harm or risk to a child. But neglect is an act of omission, so the opposite of doing something, omitting something, and that would be a failure to act resulting in harm. So, for example, a child that isn't being fed enough, or a child whose needs aren't being met, that would be a neglect case. And here are some signs. So here are some signs of neglect. Physical signs could look like poor hygiene or body odor, some untreated medical conditions or inappropriate clothing. They might present as overly tired. They could be constantly hungry. They could steal food or talk about being unsupervised at home all the time. There's a few different ways this presents, but um, you'll get a picture from some of these things that there isn't a lot of good parenting happening at home, and it could be because a parent is, sick, or it could be that their parent has addiction issues, or they might just be working 5 jobs. So there's a lot of things that could lead to neglect, but it's always good to report things like this so we can explore them from the child welfare lens. It wasn't fully understood until recently how broad the impact is to children that are exposed to domestic violence, and now it's included in the category of types of abuse, because children that are exposed to domestic violence can have poorer outcomes than some of the other more prominent types of abuse. So um, there's a lot of research that talks about cortisol levels. So your brain, when it's exposed to constant yelling, produces a chemical called cortisol that numbs the brain so that you don't feel pain, but it also impedes the brain from growing. So there's a lot of reasons to try to figure out if a child is being exposed, whether they're physically at risk or they're just experiencing, life in a home where somebody is being abused. It's important to know the signs, and here are some of them. So excessive fearfulness, aggression towards other peers. Sometimes kids can present as withdrawn, sad, depressed. They might have low self-esteem. They might blame themselves often. Oh, that's my fault. I'm sorry. They might talk about having poor sleep habits. They might be overly clingy. Again, some of these might just be other things, but it could be indicative of exposure to domestic violence. Some other points of concern regarding parenting styles could include the following: a child that is without adequate supervision while in the care of a person. So if your parent is, um, having a few too many drinks, or is high, or is just, busy working in another office while they have, young children that are, at risk, um, that's concerning. Um, there could be a home environment which is physically unsafe. So a lot of homes are safe, but some people live in places where there's sharp objects, broken glass. There might be drugs that are easily accessed by children that could be used if they're not locked up or in a place they can't reach. And sometimes children are just left completely unattended. I mean, it's one thing, 5 minutes of I'm just going to be outside gardening, but it's another thing when parents are going out of town and they're leaving their kids without anybody to stay with them. So, for your knowledge, the law in Manitoba is that children under the age of 12 shouldn't be left unattended. Some 11-year-olds might present as a little bit more mature, can handle it, but on a whole, 12 is kind of the general rule of thumb. So, what should you do if you suspect abuse? Well, you can observe, document, report, and support. So, observing looks like just taking a mental note of any sign or change in behavior over the course of time that you're working with a child. You can physically document it if you prefer. You can keep a little confidential record of what you've seen. If you do have concerns, start with reporting them to your camp director, who can then make a decision on whether they think it's appropriate to come up to JCFS, give us a call, report their concerns. Alternatively, Anchor can take a report and follow up on it. I highly recommend at least running it by us and not having the burden of determining if you think it's abuse or not on your own. We're trained professionals with a lot of experience in this regard, so it doesn't mean we're automatically going to jump the gun and go to a family's home or call them, but it does mean that we will use some of our assessment tools to figure out what we think is worthy of a follow-up. Sometimes it's really a family in need of support, and whether they see it now or later down the road, we're here to support kids. I know I spoke about the number of children in care earlier in our province. I want to let you know that there was a heavier-handed practice of child welfare many years ago that doesn't exist in our system anymore. We don't apprehend kids nearly as often and only in the most extreme cases these days. So when you do make a report to JCFS or to Anchor, there's a much higher likelihood that we're going to go in, figure out what the challenges are in the family, discover how to support them best. Sometimes it looks like financial assistance, counseling. If worst case scenario, a parent isn't in a state where they can parent, we're not finding a foster home, we're finding other family members that a child can go stay with or can come into the family home. We're looking at respite workers to support families. There's a whole slew of skills and resources that we utilize to not bring children into care these days. So if that's one of your apprehensions about reporting to child welfare, please rest assured the system is very different these days. After you have a concern about a child, even if it's you're not reporting it to us, you're welcome to support them, ensure that their needs are being met and that they feel safe. So go ahead and if the child's crying, talk to them. Give them some food, nourishment, support. Talk to them. If they expand and start to talk about a child welfare matter, and I would recommend sort of listening to them but cutting them off in sort of a supportive way so that they don't have to tell their story multiple times. If they are going to disclose something big like physical abuse or child abuse, that shouldn't be your burden to hold on to. And also, if a police investigation needed to take place, we wouldn't want their report to be muddied or to be misinterpreted. So we ask that you would sort of do the basic, calming down piece and making the report to us to follow up. So again, if you're making a report to us, know that reports can be made anonymously. You can call Anchor or JCFS. If you're making a report, you're protected by law in good faith. So if you get things wrong or you're worried that you're not doing it the right way, it's really the absence of making the report that should be the concern, not the how you made the report. So please do share any concerns you have about suspected child abuse. Okay, so it's time for a group exercise. Here's a little light comedy. Best name for a dog is 5 miles. Why? That way we can tell people we walk 5 miles every day. Ba-dum-bum. Okay, so now that you're all refreshed, here is a exercise. Read it at your own pace, and we have some questions to ask afterwards. So, you're a staff member at Sunny Trails Day Camp. It's the second week of July, and your group of 8 to 10-year-olds is getting ready for swimming. As you help with sunscreen and check that everyone is wearing proper swimming gear, you notice that one camper, Evan, age 9, seems unusually quiet and withdrawn today. He flinches when another child accidentally bumps into him. Then, when it's time to change, Evan refuses to take off his shirt, even after encouragement. Eventually, you see bruises on his upper arms and lower back when his shirt is lifted slightly. You also overhear Evan tell another child, "My dad says I better not mess up again or I'll be sorry." This isn't the first time you've seen Evan act anxiously. Last week he came to camp with a black eye, which his caregiver said was from roughhousing with his cousins. So take a moment, think about Evan's story. What are some things that you suspect are going on? What factors led you to believe this? And what do you think you should do? So if you read that story and thought to yourself, this is likely a situation where Evan is experiencing physical abuse, well, I think you're right, unfortunately. Um, Physical indicators that lead to this understanding would be the bruises, the black eye, some behavioral indicators that would speak to his likelihood of being abused physically, might be the flinching, the extreme reluctance to change clothing, being withdrawn or anxious or fearful. It might also be that you know he's experiencing other things at home as well. There could be domestic violence. His dad says he better not mess up, so maybe other people are being abused in the home. But it would be important in this scenario for you to tell your camp director that these are things that you think are happening, and for them to come to us and make the report. And from there, the family will get the support that they need. Okay, so what should you do in all of this? Once again, do not confront the caregiver. It's not your role to say, "Hey, Dad, why are you beating up Evan?" You're just going to get involved in a situation that isn't your problem. Even if you care about Evan and he's your favorite camper, that's not your role. Leave it for the professionals to deal with. Document what you see and share it with your supervisor, and report your concerns immediately to your supervisor, your camp director, who then should be in touch with either Anchor or JCFS for guidance on next steps. So if you have any further questions, statistics that we used are from the Canadian Child Welfare Research Portal. There's the Manitoba Child and Family Services website, has a lot of good information. There's also the Kids Help phone number, which is just a great resource to have on hand. And of course, there's our phone number missing 4, so 204-477-7430. And again, we're on the second floor of the Asper campus. And if you ask for David, I will come and chat with you. And I hope you have an amazing summer, and I hope you don't have to report anything to us, and have a great time being at camp.